you for coming. So this is the area that we're looking at. And the reason why we picked these watersheds is here we're interested in because it's above Lake Irwin. And Lake Irwin is actually where we get our current water source from. And then it comes down Coal Creek. It's connected. This little square is Coal Creek Dam, where it connects Lake Irwin as a trans basin across to from Ruby Anthracite Creek to Coal Creek Watershed. And then it comes down through Coal Creek. We actually just use the creek to bring the water to us. And then we have a little diversion from that creek that goes into a pipe. And it's right around like Wildcat. And then Wildcat, we also have another water rights and we get water from that as well. Those then go across the river over top and then up to our water treatment plant where we have a raw reservoir where it just sits until we use it for our water treatment plant. The reason why we're also interested in this one in this watershed is because we are looking at secondary water sources. And this, we were looking here on the Slate River and over here in Town Ranch. And how we're able to look at Town Ranch is because it's close to the Slate River, but we're actually going to be looking at a well in that area. And we'll be doing those exploratory wells this fall. This is our source water protection, your typical method that is used for source water protection, where you're taking your river or your source where you're getting your water, and then you're going 1,000 feet out for your first band of zone 1, which is the strictest around that source water. And then zone 2 and zone 3 are less strict as they go further, but we just completed a source water protection plan that is on our website as well under that wildfire project. And from that, you can see what projects, including this one, were identified. This is shows the curvature like of the watershed, the Coal Creek watershed that we're really going to focus on. But there is Washington Gulch that we had some places to look at as well. We, the town, are getting funded by Colorado Water Conservation Board. And we had a stakeholder meeting today, and some of them were here, as well as CDPHE, which stands for
Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
Thank you. Okay, so what CWCB had in mind. Welcome. We just started, so perfect timing. All good. I'm Carolyn. I'm with the town, and so I'm just doing a slight intro, but the meat of the product is coming. Okay. Okay. So this is what Colorado Water Conservation Board. They're the ones that made up the whole Wildfire Ready Action Plan, and this is what they want these reports to come out with. So it's like maintain flow regimens at the historic conditions. They want us to be able to resist and absorb and recover from natural disasters. So make our watersheds more resilient. Provide high quality water supply for agricultural municipalities like the Town of Crested Butte and the environment. Provide diverse and complex habitat features, upland and riverine environment. And our consultants will go over this diagram in detail. This project is doing is we're looking at post-fire modeling, and then we're going to identify mitigation steps to help before there's a fire, is the idea. That's all. Thanks. So, Abby, thanks.
Awesome. So I think Carolyn gave a really good intro. Here's another map. It's basically the same one that you just saw, but here's our watershed. So these pink watersheds are 6th level pucks is what we call them, hydrologic unit codes. And those are generally like 20,000 acres in size. So this one here is Washington Gulch into the Slate River. This is Obie Joyful Creek, Slate River. And then this one on the west side is Coal Creek with Lake Irwin up here at the top. And so there's a few little watersheds within that Ruby Anthracite Creek watershed in our project area as well. The total area is about 60,000 acres. That's not that big. Most of the, I guess I'll say like the wildfires in 2020, the 2 largest that have happened in the recent years have been over 100,000 acres in size. So thinking about a wildfire, you know, out here, I'm not suggesting it would burn like those in that entire area, but there are wildfires that are larger than that. So it's not crazy to consider all of these watersheds as possibly contributing to post-fire hazards. So this CWCB program, the Colorado Water Conservation Board, started in, I think, 2022 with a $10 million amount that was funded by federal Infrastructure Reduction Act funding. So that $10 million came to the state, and the Colorado Water Conservation Board came up with this really sort of innovative program that is one of the first in the country to look at these issues of wildfire and think about them before the fire happens, because usually we're in emergency response mode when a wildfire happens. And so towns might be impacted, but they haven't thought about it. They don't have plans. They haven't had funding to consider plans. And so the state really wanted to try to get ahead of the game on that. And so that $10 million originally that started the program has been all spent out, but the state now is putting in state funds to continue these both planning efforts and then the mitigation projects that come out of them through state funding. So we do have this continuous funding source for now, which is really nice. The scope of the project is 6 pieces. The first 2 are really about stakeholder engagement, public engagement. Thank you for helping us with this one. Establishing a vision and goals and objectives for the town for this specific RAP. The RAP being the Wildfire Ready Action Plan. So the third piece is collecting the data, making sure we have all the GIS data that's relevant, having the intake locations on hand, places that might have important values at risk that the town needs to know about, just to make sure that they have a good plan in place for emergencies. And then the 4th and 5th steps are really about hazard identification. So that's mostly what we'll talk about today. We look at a bunch of different hazards that are all related to post-fire. So what happens after the fire burns. And then some of those hazards include flooding, which SGM has modeled some flooding scenarios that Jeff will talk about a little bit later. And then we look at this susceptibility analysis piece, and the susceptibility is really how do the hazards intersect with the values at risk. So a raw water intake that's at the base of a canyon that has high wildfire hazard, that's where those hazards might interact with that value at risk. The town, being on this alluvial fan that's coming out of the canyon, those are values at risk that could be impacted by certain hazards. So we look at that in terms of what is the susceptibility to all those different things post-fire. And then the last step is the planning and mitigation activities. So that is really where we get out all the project ideas for how can we plan for these things and make sure that we're doing everything we can even before a fire happens to make sure the watersheds are more resilient to fire, make sure they can come back and revegetate as quickly as possible, looking at the floodplains and how those interact with different values in different locations. And so we'll talk about some project ideas as well later on. That's okay.
It's the
It's always-
opposite one they're using.
Oh, really?
It's the left.
Okay. Post-fire hazards, what are we most worried about? So post-fire hazards include things like hill slope erosion. So when you burn up a forest, there's a lot of vegetation loss, of course, and all that vegetation before the fire was there to catch like rainfall, and so it doesn't hit the ground quite as hard. And then when it hits the ground, there's things like roots and little micropores that the water can kind of infiltrate into, and it slows the water down when there's vegetation there. When you lose all that vegetation, the water hits the ground really hard because there's nothing to stop it from hitting the ground, and then there's nothing on the ground anymore either, depending on how severe the fire was. So when it hits that dirt, it can pick up dirt much more easily and sort of just roll down the hillside. And so that's what causes a significant amount of erosion following wildfire. Debris and mud flows can happen for sort of the same reason. As the erosion sort of starts at the top of the watershed, it picks up speed and the water flows down and picks up speed. And the more speed and velocity it has, it can pick up larger and larger things. So then it starts taking like whole trees and boulders and rocks and things like that, and sort of creates these larger landslides and mud flows. All of those things combined can go into that water quality degradation. So when you they do a lot of treatment at the treatment plant for different things that are in the water naturally. But when there's a certain level of sediment in the water, it really can't be treated. And so if you have if you have too much sediment, that's where you have to either look for alternative water sources or figure out how you can settle out that sediment before it gets to where you're taking the water in to the treatment plant. Stream erosion and sedimentation, sort of the same type of thing. And then flooding, of course, is a big hazard post-fire. So how do we find the locations that are most hazardous? So what we like to do is we parse out those larger watersheds into what we call 7th level watersheds. And those are usually about 500 to 2,000 acres in size. So they're relatively small. And then we can look at all the different components of the watersheds and identify differences between them. And so we call that a watershed hazard analysis. So I'll show you guys some of the results from that. We also do a watershed resiliency analysis. It's sort of a similar concept, but we look at components in the watershed that might relate to resilience. So things like vegetation diversity and topographic variability and things like that. And then we also can model flooding, see where that's the worst, where that flooding risk is highest. And then we can model hazardous areas by streams. Sometimes things like stream road crossings might be a spot that would be really hazardous if the stream were to flood and it could like take out the road. So here's our watershed wildfire hazard analysis. This photo is of a debris flow that happened in 2021 after the Cameron Peak fire. So this came from a watershed, one of our 7th level watersheds. So it was about maybe a 3,000 acre watershed and burned at really high severity. There was old logging roads throughout the watershed, which caused some increased erosion. And it just had a perfect rainstorm that sat kind of at the very top of the watershed and rained like a half an inch in a half hour or something?
I thought it was 0.24.
0.24 in a half hour. It wasn't even that much water, but it happened really quickly, really intense storm. And so it created this huge debris flow that took out, unfortunately, multiple homes and killed multiple people. So these kind of tragic events are what we're trying to avoid. If we can't avoid them happening, we could at least avoid people being there and dying. So trying to make sure that we know where the hazardous spots are so that we can be prepared. So This analysis includes wildfire hazard, debris flow hazard, hill slope erosion, and roads. And then each of those components has a number of data pieces involved, and I'm not going to go over those in detail, but if you have questions, feel free to ask. Again, the wildfire hazard, we model wildfire hazard, and for this project, we actually got that model from the Gunnison County Community Wildfire Protection Plan. So that we can sort of align our analysis with theirs. And then for debris flow, we also do a model for that. And we also look at sort of the steepness of the watershed, which has a pretty strong correlation with whether or not there's going to be a lot of debris flow hazard. Then the roads piece is important because roads, especially like forest roads that are higher up in the watershed and usually not paved, they're sort of a sediment source. If there were to be a flooding situation, the water sometimes jumps out of the stream. A lot of times we build the roads right along the stream channel too. And so if the water rises up above the stream channel, it'll jump over onto the road, and then it almost uses the road as a new stream channel, and it can take a ton of sediment off the road. And we've seen, like, when we hike around in post-fire environments, there will be old like mining roads that haven't, or logging roads that haven't been used in 100 years, and they get cut by the stream down like 6 feet down. So it takes all that sediment and adds even more sediment and debris into the stream. They can sort of increase the speed that the water's flowing down because it gives them a new path. It gives the water a new path to flow on. So that's why roads is a big component here. I think that people don't necessarily realize how important roads can be in post-fire. And then hill slope erosion, I already sort of talked about, but that's a key piece of the hazards. So here's our results from that analysis with all those different components in it. So you can see kind of these blobby colors are our 7th level watershed. So that's where we've delineated smaller sections of the watersheds to look at. And so the red is the highest hazard, orange is high, yellow is moderate, blue is low, and green is lowest. So you can see certain places start to pop up. And that's where we like to look at this is how we identify the places on the landscape that are going to add the most hazard to our situation. So Coal Creek obviously pops up quite red. A little bit over here in Lake Irwin, like above Lake Irwin, these are orange, so high hazard. Below the lake is the red, which luckily for this project, we take it out of the lake before it goes down on that watershed. And then a little bit up here in Washington Gulch, there's some red. And then down here, there's this one, which is sort of isolated, but this one also pops up a little bit. So then yes.
So I'm not sure if I can see, so the town of Crested Butte is just outside of Coal Creek.
Yes, exactly. This guy right here.
So that's the town right there?
That's the town.
Oh, so we're in the red.
We are in
You're
the
at the end of
red.
the fire hose.
Yes. So this is like Coal Creek is sort of a canyon, right? And it's kind of nice and open at the top. And then as you go down, the stream corridor gets a little bit more confined. So it doesn't have a lot of space for the water to go. And then down here into town, what historically would have happened if town, like before town existed, that canyon would create these big giant flows of sediment and debris, and it would just deposit them at the base of the canyon because it becomes more flat. And so what that's called is an alluvial fan. And so it creates this fan shape, and it's really quite a nice place to build a town. But then we have to worry about that happening again. But it doesn't happen, on a time scale that we're super familiar with because we haven't been around for these huge events. So it can happen, but it's just the kind of thing that we need to be aware of, and that's why we're doing this plan. Anything else to say before we move on? So the resiliency analysis looks at the sensitivity of the landscape to changes like climate changes, and then factors that help the ecosystem adapt to those changes. So we were calling this the climate change vulnerability index, and we decided to change it to watershed vulnerability because of the current climate conditions. But that's kind of where it stems from. So we're really looking at not only fires, but things like droughts and heat and how that can affect that different vegetation types differently. So it's really nice to have a diversity of vegetation types that helps those ecosystems adapt to changes. So we have that ecosystem sensitivity piece, and then adaptive limitations is how well can it take on these changes and adapt or be resilient to the changes that come. So the map from that analysis looks like this, and it looks pretty similar to the previous one. So what that tells us is that we can just focus on, these smaller areas and really address both that watershed vulnerability component and the wildfire post-fire hazard component. And so we decided with Carolyn and a number of stakeholders that the sort of the more in-depth analysis for the project would focus really on Coal Creek. And then we have some mitigation recommendations up here in Washington Gulch as well. And then we'll have project recommendations across the whole project area, but the focus has become Coal Creek. So here, I guess, these are what we call focus areas, and that's how we break down this whole big landscape. We look at all the watersheds individually, and then we start to find clumps of high hazard watersheds that we can look at together and sort of start to identify different projects across the landscape, including, forestry, thinking about the forests, thinking about the streams and the connectivity with the floodplains, thinking about the water infrastructure and all those different pieces, and how we can combine different projects to create more resilient watersheds. So with that, I think I can pass it off to Jeff. Numbers.
So exciting. Any engineers always get spent. So nice job, Abby. Did an excellent job explaining, okay, what happens during wildfire and at the hill slope level. That's going to change the hill slope, which is going to then change how water, is absorbed. And so what we do now is we can take that information that Brad and Abby generated and look at, okay, how much water is going to be coming out? What's the hydrology after a rainfall event coming out and then moving downstream? And so a couple caveats for doing this model. We're looking at, to some extent, at a worst case scenario, but as Abby pointed out, we're assuming the whole watershed is going to burn. That's not that outlandish to think that might happen, but then also assuming that we're going to have a rain event that's going to land on, take up the whole watershed. That's maybe a little more subject, but it's possible for sure. So bringing those caveats in, what we can do is we have, sections of Coal Creek moving downstream, going from, up at the Y and then moving down into town, and then also looking at these subbasins. And so what we do is taking in that burn severity. So this is, L is low to medium severity. We don't have any fully high burn severity. So most of these watersheds they're burning, but there is areas that are open, aspen forest, meadow forest, and that the whole, you would generally see a high burn severity if you had only a coniferous forest that was super dense and all that goes. And that's, I think Black Hollow is probably the high severity, where that's going to be much worse. Luckily, we have a little more diversity in our watersheds. So they are pretty much ranked low and medium in terms of when a fire happens. That's how bad it's going to alter it, how the water is going to come up. So pre-burn, these are some of the levels, a 2-year would be a 2-year recurrence flood that's coming off. And you see some of the flows that are coming down. So, 2 years, like a 50% chance it's going to happen that year. And I guess a number to keep in mind, I know these are, numbers, but essentially what Shay has informed us, Shay and Carolyn has said, when it gets to over 400, like 441, that's when Coal Creek starts to, get outside of its channel and they start issuing sandbags and all that stuff. So 400, is that level. And you can see, so at a 100-year flood, pre-burn, that's going to be pretty big. But now we're looking, okay, let's say that the watershed burns. Now a 100-year flood is going to be up to 1,300. It's going to be a major issue for the town. And so we can look at different scenarios. We did a lot of different ones, kind of typical for what you're supposed to do. But I just put, for brevity's sake, I just put up a couple of them. And where that leads
Can
up.
you add just like for people, what a 2-year and what a 100-year could, like, what does that mean?
Well, so
Just
a 100-year flood would be 1 chance in 100 that it's going to happen. Right now, this is a technique that's we've used it, but now we're realizing that doesn't even make sense anymore because things have changed. We're still kind of stuck with it, and that's what we're using. But we fully recognize that 100, you could have 300-year floods in the same year. I mean, that's not necessarily that outlandish, but it's just kind of a statistical analysis to figure out how much you can design for. So those are the numbers.
I have a quick question. The last number, the 1320.
Yes, cubic feet per second coming through.
Right. So can you describe what that means?
So imagine that it's at 400, it's starting to get outside of the channel. So at 1300, it's going to have come through. You're probably going to, most of the bridge crossings are going to be, jammed up with debris and all that stuff. And so water's coming into town. And I have a picture of, not of a 100-year flood, but kind of what it would look like on a 2-year, but it would just be that much worse on the 100-year flood. 1300, I mean, I guess in terms of numbers, I think right now the East River is flowing, or no, maybe the Gunnison River is probably flowing at about down to town 600 CFS or something as a guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
CFS. So that's a lot. That's the East River, the channels, or the Gunnison River in the town of Gunnison. A lot bigger coming through. So it's a lot. And I'll show you some maps and maybe see if they can make sense. But yeah, that's part of the problem with these things. It's like, what does that really mean? And each, I mean, if that's what the Colorado is flowing in Grand Junction, it's, there's fish dying because it's just that channel is that much bigger. Oops. Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. So what we did is we're doing a modeling effort. And the reason that we're doing modeling is not so much to predict exactly what's going to happen because there's all sorts of various caveats and assumptions go in, but to try to point us in the right direction of what are areas that we need to focus at. And so this is the blue is the flooding. You can see what it's doing into town. It's spreading out. And this is just a 2-year recurrence interval. So generally a 50% chance it could happen this year. And it's having a pretty big impact in town. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus just on 2 points. One is going to be the raw water, or no, the town head gate where water comes in. And then I'm going to look at town a little bit. But we have maps and done other sections depending on stuff. So for example, this is, we left this one in there. I don't want to talk about this one. So this is where, here's Coal Creek and here's the town's intake on the south side of the creek. The south side of the creek, north facing. And so this is obviously a huge area of concern because if you burn your watershed and you generate on the sediment, what's going to happen to this area? And you can see, again, these maps are 2-year occurrence intervals. This one is a depth. And so 0 to 4.6 are levels. Here's their head gate. There's an old stream channel that a lot of the water is going to be going. And actually, in terms of the velocity, this is not how fast the stream is moving. the stream is really going to kind of come and really kind of flow more over there. And so we can use this modeling to start thinking about possible ways to, to work in this stream channel to prevent this from getting clogged. That's one example. And then here's Town. And again, this is a 2-year occurrence interval. This is depth. This is velocity. I chose 2 years. One of the suggestions from our stakeholders is to kind of up the recurrence interval a little bit to get people a little more concerned. But this is going to happen. Okay. And you can see these are depths. The one kind of nice takeaway to some extent is that most of town is not going to be under 6 feet of water. Most of town is going to be under, 6 to 12 inches of water. So, yeah, if you're in Coal Creek, it's going to be quite deep. There's a couple other spots. Another reason we do this map is the new fire station, the giant fire station, is actually in an area which is not going to be hugely impacted by this flow based on our modeling. So that's kind of nice to know for emergency services when you do have this event. Again, just a 2-year occurrence, so fairly high probability, this is what's going to happen. And then this shows the velocities. And there are going to be some spots, that are higher at 32 feet per second. That water's moving pretty good. But again, most of it's going to be less than a foot deep. But yeah, it's a problem. The other challenge with modeling town is what in reality is going to happen is all these bridges and culverts and buildings are going to make this huge complex mess. So we kind of do this analysis, but it's really amazing after flooding, how hard it is for modeling once it gets into town environments to predict what happens because, you think it's going to go here, or some car gets jammed up and then the water goes over here and a whole new channel opens up. So it gives us a rough idea of what's going to happen. All right. So any questions about flooding before I turn it over to Brad?
I'm Brad. Values at risk. An idyllic setting, right? We all want to stay that way.
Taylor.
So what are the values at risk? So we know this in this perspective from this project, it's like reservoirs, dams, the municipal water intakes, there's ag water intakes too, the infrastructure, water supply pipelines, things like that. And roads, Abby talked a little bit about roads. That's part of the transportation. And we've seen a number of roads get blown out after fires. And life and property, as Abby mentioned, there's actually been more people that have died in post-fire events in Colorado than during wildfires. So we're concerned about that as well. And so the combination, we're talking about this vulnerability analysis now, we can talk about all the hazards, right, that Abby and Jeff talked about. And then we take those and intersect them on this watershed scale with the values at risk. And then we can come up with places that we really even narrow down further, places that we really want to try to look at to see what we can do to improve the situation, pre-fire or post-fire. And so then what do we do? What kind of projects would we propose to do? And so obviously protecting infrastructure is pretty obvious. That makes a lot of sense. And this wildfire severity reduction in fuel breaks, this is just a way to remove some of the fuel from the landscape, trees, green stuff that would burn up and cause extra heat and increased severity. Road stream crossings, talked about that before. Again, those are hazardous, and we've actually lost some people in Colorado that tried to drive across flooded intersections, and then the bridge culvert wasn't there anymore. So, they can be really hazardous. Riparian enhancement and floodplain improvements are basically looking at, some of you might have heard the term beaver dam analogs, BDAs. It's like that's the hot new thing, but really we're looking at it in terms of the whole stream the floodplains, riparian areas, these are all so the vegetation by streams and then the flat parts, the floodplains by streams. Sometimes streams get really incised and they can't access that floodplain. And that's not as good for storing, for having floods that can access those floodplains and deposit some of their sediment and things like that. And so there's a lot of things that we as humans have done to our streams that have caused them to not function very well anymore. And so there are places we can improve their function. Increasing forest diversity, it's another one where we have aspen mixed in with conifers and openings and things like that. When it burns, then it's not all high burn severity. Most of the high burn severity places we see are spruce fir and other conifer, lodgepole pine, things like that. Aspen doesn't burn as hot. And openings don't burn as hot. Grass fires can burn fast, but they don't, and they can burn hot, but they don't last very long. And then complementary projects are an important part of what we're going to propose. We're going to be looking for places that have like infrastructure improvements and riparian improvements, in-stream improvements, and forest improvements all in the same watershed, so that we know we're not going to stop wildfires, like I said before, but if we can put all the change in number of the puzzle pieces in these watersheds, then we have a better shot at improving the results after the fire.
Joe. So after doing all that, one of the questions that you asked Kimberly is, okay, so what's kind of the goals? Ultimately, we would like to give the town of Crested Butte, okay, here's our analysis. Here's some specific locations that you really should start focusing, trying to address, because and address this pre-fire, so that when a fire does happen, and it's probably going to happen, you're better equipped. So one of them obviously is the trying to figure out how to protect the raw water intake. Talked about that one a little bit. So there's a couple ideas that we have there. Another one that I didn't mention, and maybe you'd be surprised to know that it's on one side of the river, and then it has this pipeline that is barely above the Coal Creek that then crosses over the other side and goes to the drinking water plant. And you really only have about 3 to 4 feet here. So in any type of a, flood related post-fire situation, your water pipeline's probably going to get taken out. Town has recognized this. They're already looking at options for, trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with this? But that's clearly an obvious thing. And again, the work that we do can help inform the town. Now they have, our results as well to go out for funding sources and say, okay, we know this is a problem. We've got this modeling to show that this is going to be an issue, and hopefully that will help them secure some future funding to take care of this issue. Some other ideas that you can have, clearly, doing something with the culverts, either armoring them or, making sure that they don't get filled up with debris and then plug and then run over the road. So that's a couple options. Doing the low-tech process restoration, like, increasing the stream connectivity, that's an option that you can do. So those are just a few of the options. Another big one is also developing some type of a warning system. So when it happens, that, the town has better notification to either notify, residents with, some type of a warning system. Also, understand the water quality that's coming down the pike. So maybe an ability to turn off their raw water intake, knowing that there's been precipitation and a, big slug of, sediment laden water is coming down the stream. Increasing signage so people are aware of this issue. These are just a couple possible options that are going to come out of this report. We developed kind of a rough list of what to do or what some options are, including the raw water pipe, to, doing fuels reduction. These aren't necessarily in priority, but something that would be great for those of you that have come is based on your knowledge of town, your experience in the area, this presentation. One of the big things is this is a public outreach meeting. We would love for you, we're going to pass out some stickies, and we would love for you to look at these options. Maybe there's some other ones you're concerned about. And if you could just kind of, say, list ones that you think might be important to you. Again, that's helping us demonstrate that, you know.
Yeah.
That we've talked to everyone that we can, but obviously you guys are a valuable resource. And so, you know, that's the big part of this process is developing and using the community to figure out what we might want to do. And that is our presentation with 1 minute before 6.
There we go. Good job.
So any questions for any of us as you're going through and thinking about any of this or comments or?
When you talked about the flood warning system, would that also include, I guess, warning residents to get out of here, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Evacuation.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
And since we're on that, what about a warning system for evacuating when the actual fire might be occurring? Other than, I know people who live here, most of them or many of them probably have the alerts and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
But are we talking about any other kind of?
Well, what the county did, what was the name of the county?
Oh, yeah, they're protecting.
The C.
Community wildfire protection.
Plan. So I think that the focus of that is more towards that, okay, when the fire is gonna happen, what they do. So we're not gonna probably, I mean, we will certainly use that and incorporate that, but we'll leverage what they've already done. The county has done in terms of, you know, I don't know what they've done in terms of the services. I haven't looked at it yet, but that'll be part of it, sure.
Yeah, because I think that the evacuation procedure for Mount Crested Butte, visitors even all over
Yeah,
the town and people who are out in the backcountry are,
Okay.
it's all, you have different needs and different areas and how to evacuate.
yeah,
And you know, something like this is gonna come along.
yeah,
When it comes, not if, probably like in July.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
monsoons hit.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
everything's here. And
Yeah.
well, like one of the things we've talked about is, you know, it's pretty much a one-way road of wildcat, you know, and that
Right.
area is the dense coniferous forest. It's gonna burn and there's no way out, right? So, you know, figuring out, that's less of what the scope of this is.
Yeah, I
to do,
understand that.
but certainly it's worthwhile. The other thing, you know, that I think it's great actually this year, I thought the county was fairly proactive in coming up with stage 1, you know, fire restrictions. And so, you know, that'll probably end up here as well. Just a reminder that, yeah, it's gonna, you know, it's not if, you know, it's when it's gonna happen and if we can be proactive. So that'll serve, you know, some of those kind of management options. The things that we would like to reinforce that are a result, you know, also in the county's plan and et cetera, to make sure we're all on the same page of understanding how it's.
And then I think also too, that once we get all of this information and we have time to digest it, we'll be updating our internal policies, whether it be our, you know, hazardous mitigation plan that the county does with everybody here, all the way down to our evacuation plan that we have in our emergency response plan. So this is going to inform a lot of those things that now you're talking about.
Right, I mean, there's nothing that gets your attention when the siren at the fire station goes out continuously. Like it did during that one day during COVID. And we live right across the street from them, so it was pretty. We don't mind it, we like.
And that's different than the town.
We like the siren, no, it wasn't
It's the same
town, it was, yeah, I have a video of it, it was very cool. I mean, I think they were doing it for first responders.
Yeah.
But it would get your attention even if you didn't know what it meant.
Yeah.
Whether it was a flood, fire.
Yeah.
So forth. People would then be just communicating.
Yeah.
Like run to the sign over here. What's going on?
Yeah, a little.
Well, and then the thing too is like, it's not like we're gonna be on high alert 305 days a year. We know when we have the monsoon season, that's generally when things happen. And, you know, you get a nice steady rain and even if it rains all day, that's usually not the type of events that trigger these massive flooding scenarios. It's generally during monsoonal flow. But that being said, in the Front Range, you know, in 2013, you know, we got, I think in I was living in Boulder at the time, and I think we got 20 inches of rain in a week, which is how much, it's more than we usually get in a whole year. So things are changing for sure. But with the warning system and the thing, it's not like, oh, it's happened and now we just got to have your bags ready to go. Which is a little bit fortunate, that we're not always, on edge the whole time. But, people should be educated that, okay, it's monsoon season, and if you hear the alarm, it's,
After a fire.
yeah, or maybe even before.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand, and I certainly didn't, that it can take very little rain to
Yeah.
cause a huge
I mean,
problem.
0.2 inches in
Right.
half an hour, like, that's not really that much, but that's pretty big rainstorm. We were seeing in the 4 mile flood, we were looking at 15-minute intervals, and it was 0.1 inches in 15 minutes. That's what was triggering the mud flows. And most rains aren't, it's a hard rain, but we get, that happens.
If you were in Elk a few years ago, I have a video of this too, because we were sitting outside at Rumors, and there was a huge rainstorm. And young people started paddleboarding down Elk Avenue.
Yeah.
And I was with someone who couldn't cross the water, and I had to go home and put my ski pants on and come back in my boots and come back and get her. So that, just looking at that would probably make a lot of, I mean, it was fun, but
Yeah.
it was not fun.
Yeah.
I think it's great that all the work you're doing, everybody, and that making sure that town and county are all on the same
Well,
page.
town has been awesome and proactive, and actually Shay's not sleeping sometimes at nights because he worries about some of this stuff. But yeah, it's important to consider because it's going to be an issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you guys could, any feedback you have in terms of priorities, I'll just collect those. And that's just, again, more information that we'll throw in from our stakeholders as well. And yeah, and we also have some maps that we put up here if you want to actually get a closer look at what some of these sub watersheds. Thanks for your time.
Question, but I think Patrick has one first.
I was just gonna ask how you want us to prioritize that. It
Oh, yeah,
says
me too. That was my
your
question.
priority.
No, your priority.
Do we write like one? and-
Well, you could say, we'll understand if it's the first one and it's 14 and that's your priority. So you could just list it at the top. yes, or
Okay,
something.
rank them.
Yeah, so and you don't have to rank all of them, but you can look and be like, I'm really into fuels reduction. That's what I think from my perspective as a member of this community. That's what I'm into.
Yeah.
So you don't have to rank every single one of them. I'm just saying like a couple of things that rise. And maybe we forgot something too. If you're like, you forgot this, hit that. We're just gathering information.
Or other information, like if you, like that Elk Street, like flooding is already happening or something, or if there's a bridge near your house that looks like it's gonna overtop regularly, or anything that you have noticed.
Is the town gonna have emergency paddle boards ready?
That is what's
all we
happening.
need.
Yeah.
Those people from Lake Irwin, when it hits, they're gonna be paddleboarding all over the
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So with all the great turnout tonight, I think that I don't know how the community can be engaged. Because I think there are a lot of people, including second homeowners, they have some stake in being here and building, all the building that's going on and so on. And your kids are in school and, you gotta think about that if something happens. So, I don't know how people.
Well, we're gonna have, we have one more, when we actually get all our results together, and this is kind of an interim, midterm reporting type thing. So we did have, and maybe people thought of this, like, we had a really good stakeholders turnout, so there's a lot,
Yeah.
of people who were like
Yeah.
in charge of dealing with stuff, right? But you're right, getting, and maybe that final package, how do we reach the community in a broader sense?
I'm gonna put this on our website along with the recording. And then we also had it in the paper for the last few weeks. But yeah, maybe we get the newspaper to do an article on it.
So one thing that I might add to this is some sort of community education.
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, good idea. Great idea.
so that they're not, everyone wants to be kind of prepared. Of course, it's human nature to wait until
And that's more,
off the edge of the cliff.
yeah, but that's more again, Gunnison CWPP, right, isn't it?
I think the town might want to communicate to people a lot of this, including how to evacuate when there's like if kids are at school or what they need to do, what the pathway is, what the protocol is.
The kids do is walk down the street to the gym.
It probably is more the CDPHE, but still, you know, making people informed.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're just, this is a really scientifically based project that's really looking at the watershed. It's not focused, its intention is not to develop an evacuation plan. That is not the intention of this project specifically in its scope. That's something that we will have to adapt as, again, with our other policies, once we get information from this project. This project will inform those things, but this project will not develop an evacuation plan.
And the hazard mitigation plan, I think the county
Does that.
does
As
that
well as
for
our-
all sorts of different hazards that might happen.
And we also have our,
Included in that.
we also have our own emergency response plan too, that's supplemental to the hazardous mitigation plan. And so that would be the plan that would really kind of,
Hone in.
yeah, hone in on this, take maybe some of the information from this project and kind of inform how we want to respond.
Actually, if you look at this, the amount of turnout from the public here, if you look at, based on the population and then scale it up to places like we've been, like Colorado Springs,
Yeah.
this would be a huge crowd. Right?
For sure.
So we do in Colorado Springs and we'll get 20, maybe 15, so this is much better turnout.
And we did have one person on at noon today.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was public.
I think that stakeholder is like key for that, because they each have their community connections and that's really how you get the public.
Well, and then, a lot, like Shay said, a lot of this is the mitigation action, so, yeah, we need the help, of course, we need the help. Some coordination with Mount CB folks and.
And the Gunnison CWPP is actually online now. Kim, so you can look. That is up, and that's more on that stuff that you're requesting.
I think some of the recommendations that come out of this plan will include a public education component. But we're not so much thinking still about evacuation. It's more like if you do a forestry project and you're cutting down all these trees, maybe you can put up a sign to tell the public why you're doing that and talk to them about wildfire hazards. But that would be more the public education, I think.
There's some other actions too, kind of along that same line that we'll have in here, like trying to maintain this stakeholder group. One of the things we found in other post-fire situations is that having like a nonprofit group or something in charge of a recovery group that's in place already and has some capacity to do something is really important. Just because someone has to run this and get everybody together and say, okay, what are we going to do? And we can apply for a grant here and we can ask for assistance here. And if someone knows how to do that and you have some of those relationships built up already, you're really ahead of the game. So those are some of the other recommendations we'll have.
And the projects that come out of this project, this report, the town will be championing all of them. It will be a lot of the other stakeholders who also champion.
How are a lot of these projects going to be funded? Or, what kind of funding sources are you going after? Because maybe good public engagement would help if something that's like a tax mill levy or something like that. I don't know.
So you want me to speak to this?
Yeah, sure.
So this is operated within the enterprise fund. So property tax is not associated with this project at all. It's being funded through the ratepayers. And through sewer and water bills, right? Funding, we're always in search of grant funding, whether it be from CWCB, DOLA, other wildfire type funding efforts that we really haven't even gotten kind of involved with. DOLA and CWCB, we've done work with them in the past, continue. These projects are, a lot of the projects that we're still talking about, like right now, have already been identified in the master planning process. And so are already incorporated into our capital improvement plan. The alternate source water supply, we have a project in 2027 lined out already for that. The raw line assessment, we're already doing that now. And we have something penciled in for improvements there. So a lot of that stuff's already been built in to our budget already. And anything new will get incorporated into it right now and spread it out over the years and figure out how to move forward with the projects. But in the end, these prioritizations are really important because we probably can't afford to do all of them. And so we're going to have to look at cost effectiveness and, the pros and cons for each one of these projects and which ones we're going to get the most out of and the most benefit out of.
Yeah, and one of the comments earlier was about, federal funding. Federal funding has changed a lot. Badly, for some of these projects, but the state has picked up the funding for this program, and there are implementation grants for this program too. And so that's another source. And so make sure your state legislators know that you support this because they have to make decisions on what they're going to fund. And there's a state funding deficit predicted for next year again. So, so we initially got $10 million from the federal funding Abby mentioned, which started this whole program. And then this fiscal year, the state allocated $5 million, which isn't a lot of money across the whole state. And so some of the implementation projects going to cost a lot more than the planning.
Oh, yeah.
That's really where the money goes and where it's important. So yeah, talk to your state legislators. Tell them you like this.
To meet to kind of deal with $1 billion whole project. It's a good time to speak up.
Yeah. Yeah, what makes sense. I think if you talk about, community stability, security, things like that, that really, I think that's kind of offering some of the stuff. It's like, we need, the town of Crested Butte is built on an alluvial fan. It's where water, instead of it used to just run down and deposit and will again. When that happens, I don't know, but there's some pretty significant risks here. So,
Is our watershed area at 60,000 acres, is it small relative to perhaps other municipalities or whomever that we would be competing with for funds? Are we?
I don't think the state's not necessarily looking at it that way right now. So some of these.
Determine who gets funds and.
Some of them were here today
Yeah.
and they were like, this is a real issue. We see this as one of the places we really need to focus.
Yeah.
So they actually are really involved.
Yeah, one of the guys that makes a lot of he probably wouldn't say this, but he makes a lot of funding decisions for these projects. Was here today and we took him out and he knows, he understands.
He was like, because we had us talking and then we had Mount CB talking about their water supply and they're like, oh, we're really happy that you guys have like alternative water sources and all this stuff. That's great. We're gonna focus on CB.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, I don't think they determine it by area or even by population, probably. It's more just about what the projects are and how well they fit with whatever evidence you have that it's an issue. And there's enough funding right now to go around, it seems like.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times too, because you guys have worked so hard on the plan, you have the evidence to prove like, here's why we need to do what we need to do. And so when they're going to fund, that's a good track to say, oh, they've done all their homework, just with other grants.
yeah. And the state's involved with us when we did the source water protection, and then they're involved in this project. And so they're along on the whole ride, so they know what the issues are. And they know all the different places, and they know which ones they want to, like, that need to accelerate, so. So you are concerned because they are concerned as well. It's because it's a concern.
I just really appreciate the proactive nature of
Agreed.
this plan. I think it's something that you don't see a lot, and how do we like get that story out to people of like, hey, we really are planning ahead.
Yeah.
For these things is really commendable.
Right.
And it's really like you explaining that program with the state, it's really exciting that they created that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very unique. And a lot of other states in the West are starting to be like, oh, that's a good idea. Let's do that too. So it's pretty cool. to be on the
We've actually, Colorado's been a pretty proactive state. We've been working on a lot of this post-fire stuff since '07. We created this group, and CWCB was part of it. John Logan was part of it when it started, and he was here today. And that's really where it kind of came from and built out of. And so there's just been a lot of people that have been really proactive, and it's partly because of what we've seen, 5 people get swept away in the debris flow and die, and 7 houses get blown into the river. It's like grabs people's attention. Should be concerned.
All right, you guys got your list? Homework?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey.